Hey, with us today is Ryan Thompson. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, sir?
Good, good. How's it going with you?
Well, not too bad. It's been a day at work for sure, but we all know what that feels like. So,
100%.
okay, got to make that money, especially to support our hobbies for sure. So everyone gets a little background, a little intro is like to call it. So with us, like I said, is Ryan Thompson. He's a IT professional, married, member of the McGuire Irish pub pipe band. We'll definitely get into that a little bit later on. A drummer, cooking enthusiast, almost 10 years of brewing, a yeast banking fanatic between 20 and 30 different strands. We're definitely going to get into that as well. A do-it-yourself brewer, that's who I'm definitely want to talk to. So you have a stovetop system, under the sink counterflow chiller, and a do-yourself glycol chiller, which is awesome. Oh, and you've been featured on Brewlosophy podcast. I did check that out. But we're going to talk about that. We're talking about that one here a little bit. Is there anything else that I missed?
Now that's about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
like you said, I've got about 10 years of homebrewing experience in there, and I actually looked into the hobby. So, a guy that I used to work with was actually in the McGuire's Pipe Band, which at the time was sponsored by the McGuire's Irish Pub, which is also a brewery. And then one of the other guys that I worked with split off, and now he's brewing in town too. His name's Carson. He runs Alga Brewery here in Pensacola.
Okay.
And so I just, it's weird. It's like the universe knew, hey, this guy's brewing 2 batches in, boom.
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of, I have like a little opening question. So you mentioned in the forum that you had a coworker share some hard apple cider with you, and your first thought was, wow, this is cheap, $20 for 5 gallons. Tell me about that story a little bit.
Definitely. So I'm married into a family. I've got 4 stepchildren, none of my own, and at the time we were single income. So I was like, hey,
Mm,
that's cheap. I can go to Sam's Club and I can get 5 gallons of apple
yeah.
juice, some sugar in there, and then toss EC 1118 in there and set a fermenter aside, and it just
Hmm.
works.
Hmm.
So, I did that. Now, I will tell you, so the first batch I ever did of that, my wife called me up about 2 days into fermentation, freaking out, and she told me our septic tank was backing up, and I had explained to her that was the fermenter. So, and it
Yes, the
sounds
rhino
so
farts.
bad. But
so
yeah,
what? So was that the first batch that made you almost quit brewing then, or is that a
no.
different story?
So the first batch that made me almost quit brewing is when I went in full fledged after that and bought a brewer's fest kit. So it was a Belgian vet beer.
Hmm.
And, I didn't get the spice pack with it. I didn't have temperature control, and it was the worst thing I've ever tasted. And
Hmm.
so it was that crossroads of should I continue or should I just
Hmm.
give up? And I'm like, hey, I want to learn what I did wrong. And so I just kept going and going and going and always strive to get a little bit better each batch. And so, and here I am. I try to brew about 5.5 gallons every 2 weeks.
Wow, yeah, you are very dedicated. I think I'm like if I get 6 or 7 a year in, I just life busy, all sorts of stuff. This year I have a board. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 already on the board I want to get to. So hopefully I'm going to brew this weekend. Which granted, this episode comes out later in the year, but regardless, I still hopefully brew this weekend. Um, so after 3 or 4 batches, you also mentioned that you joined the McGuire's Pipe Band, which you said was sponsored by the Irish, or excuse me, the McGuire Irish Pub themselves. How did that happen? How
So
joining the band part?
the joint of the van part, the guy that I worked with that actually
Mm-hmm.
brought in the hard apple cider, his homebrew hard apple cider, he was actually a member of pipe band. So he was a piper. And, I've
Okay.
been playing in bar bands for a while at the time. I drummed all through high school. I just never knew how to stop. So I started playing in bar bands and did that for
Yeah.
15 years. And
Wow.
it was all local bar bands. And so when this guy said, hey, if you join the band, you get free beer, sign me up.
Heck yeah, that's the best way to do it.
That's it.
So you play the pipes and the drums, or you're more the drum
No, I just
side?
play the drums.
You just play the drums. Gotcha, gotcha. You also said that you got to compete with the Rosie O'Grady's. How did that work out?
So one of the guys that the McGuire's pipe band is such a small world. So one of the guys in McGuire's
Mhm.
pipe band, he was actually part of Rosie O'Grady's in Orlando, it was a
Okay.
competition band. And at the time they were the closest one that were accepting remote members. So,
Hmm.
I got to go down there and compete with those guys in the small world of Rosie O'Grady's in Orlando. The pipe
Hmm.
band ended up keeping the name, but the business they were run after originated in Pensacola. So Rosie O'Grady's in Pensacola is still around,
Mm.
but the Rosie O'Grady's in Orlando on Church Street closed down, but the pipe band was able to keep the name there. So small world, but yeah, it was so weird how many similarities and just everything, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that sounds really cool. Um, so where I live in like Northeast Tennessee, which was pretty much founded by the Scots and Irish. But we don't have a whole lot of like Irish influence around here, which I always found pretty interesting. I know when I lived up in Michigan, there was a few Irish bars I would go to and in a frequent, and there's a pretty cool like live music and stuff like that. We thought was really neat atmosphere. Excuse me. So pardon me. So when you're at this part, so when you were at the McGuire's pub, is this where you met the professional brewers at? They gave you advice on how to brew beer. All right. So how did that?
100%.
So what was that? When you joined the club? No, when you joined the band, and you started bringing your own beers to them and asking them to
So
try it out.
that was another happenstance situation. Like I said, all this it's like
Okay.
the universe knew. So we had
Heck yeah.
actually played a funeral for one of the old not Blue Angel, one of the old Fat Albert. I think it was a mechanic or something like that. And so we went
Oh.
back to the pub to have lunch during the week. And we just came
Mm-hmm.
back from NAS Pensacola and we're having lunch and just happened to run into the brewers. And so I gave him my number and said I just started homebrewing. I was maybe 3 or 4 batches in. So, a couple weeks went by and I ended up bringing beer in there. You know how it is when when you brew your home brew and you don't get any input. Your home brew is
Yeah.
always the best thing you ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And, I got lucky because I was able to get constructive criticism. And I tell all home brewers this, I looked into it because I
Mm-hmm.
found brewers that were willing to not only pour my beers out in front of me if they weren't good, but to tell me how to make them better. Instead of just, oh, it's great, drain pouring. So like I said,
Mm-hmm.
these guys, I've learned so much from.
No, that's true. That is very helpful. Is getting very honest feedback. I feel like I've talked to other people about this so far. It's like when you bring beer, especially to like a homebrew club, everyone's like, "Oh, this is great beer," blah blah blah. But at the same time, you also think like, well, it's also just free beer, so free beer is always good beer, right? But I do have a couple few. There's probably the 3 or 4 members that are very honest with me and will ask me questions and give me ideas of things I could improve on, suggest the things I may have done wrong. So for example, we had an Oktoberfest competition. I think it was back in October. Yeah, October it was. So I made my first Marzen beer, and I didn't do a diacetyl rest. I didn't even know what a diacetyl rest was. So I made it. I thought it tasted good. I did taste a little toffee, but I thought maybe that was just maybe I scorched the grains just a little bit, kind of got that that toffee flavor. Well, after talking to one of my buddies, he's like, "Well, I taste butter." I was like, "You taste butter?" So I went back and I tasted it again. I was like, "All right, so that toffee flavor I'm tasting, maybe it is more butterish than toffee. Like I think he asked me if it did. I do a diacetyl rest. And I was like, "No, I don't even know what that is." He explained it to me. I'm like, next time when I try to make it, now I'll try to do that as well. So like, I feel like every time somebody's honest with you, you pick up something. I've learned. Like I said, you're my number 8. Yeah, you're number 8 guest so far, and I'm expecting to learn a lot from you as well too. Because I've learned so much from so many people so far. That being said, after 10 years of doing this, are you still in touch with these brewers? Do you still go to get advice from them?
Yeah, I was just with him 2 days ago, and the biggest compliment
Oh,
that I got wasn't, oh man, this is good. The brewer went back to thirds. This beer right here didn't say,
oh,
oh
heck
man, it's so
yeah.
good. Just kind of watching. They're not pouring it. They're actually actively going for it. That's the biggest compliment you can get, in my opinion. So
Oh man, that is awesome.
yeah.
So like, how many brewers are there that you're actually talking to?
So actively, there's two at McGuire's
Okay.
there that I'm always picking their brains. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
they've helped me out so much, and I've learned so much from those guys. Every once in a while, I'll hit up Carson from Alga. It's more rare that I do, just because Carson's a
Mm-hmm.
very busy person. But like I
Yeah.
said, 99.9% of it's the brewers at McGuire's.
Have you had the opportunity to collaborate with these guys at all on a brew day?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, have you?
So,
Okay.
yeah, they actually stepped up one of my brews and sold it as a seasonal about 5 years ago. It was a Piper's Pale Ale, and it was a Golden
Uh-huh.
Promise smash with Mosaic and their proprietary house strains.
Actually sounds really good. I've not a good go and promise mosaic. I do like mosaic hops. I think that's one of my favorite hops so far, especially for like a smash beer. I think it makes an excellent smash beer. Um, I do actually have a smash beer on my thing because I have a couple experimental hops that I bought from I think it was like Atlantic Homebrew Supply out of was it Raleigh, North Carolina. They went out of business last year. By the time I got to their sale, all they had left was hops. So I have one that says like it's tropical stone fruit and papaya. I was like, oh, this might make an interesting smash beer or a tropical blonde ale or something like that. So I'm definitely looking forward to doing that. So I definitely want to jump into this yeast banking obsession that you have. This is what it sounds like. So you
Mhm.
mentioned that you have between 20 and 30 strands. How did this start?
COVID, 100% COVID. I had
Really?
nothing to
Okay.
do. So, I
Oh.
was kept up in the house. I was listening to all the brewing podcasts and,
Mm-hmm.
being in the panhandle of Florida, I don't really get yeast shipped to me except for a certain little small window of the year where I know it's cold everywhere, which is usually
Mm-hmm.
late January to late March, kind of in there. That way,
Right.
it sits in a shipping container somewhere, for a day or two. I know it's still cold the whole way. But yeah, no, I just went crazy. And when I did it, I didn't know at the time that they were about to really bump up those prices. So when I did it, I was getting like little
Mm.
white labs packs for like $9, and now they're like $18 or something like that
It
now. I
can
think.
be, yeah, some of them, yeah.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
know it's kind of
yeah.
hard
So
not to be able to show us, but I mean, just kind of like kind of walk us through the process of doing it. Yeah, it'd be awesome.
actually, I've got some yeast right here. I'm getting
Oh,
ready to
okay,
harvest now. Yeah.
okay,
So
awesome.
well, I thought I did, but I'll just drink it sour. So here's some yeast that I got left over right here from a breed. What I'll do is I'll dump this whole, I'll sit it in the fridge for a while, then I'll dump this layer, off the top and
Hmm.
have a really, 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 really thick yeast slurry. And then, I'll make up my glycerin mixture and, I've got a handwritten right here, but I'll make up my glycerin mixture and I use 70% distilled water to 30% glycerin, which works out to 140 mils of distilled water to 60 mils of glycerin. And that ends up making two small jars. So what I'll do is I'll fill up I have 15 milliliter test tubes. I'll fill this up to use this to fill it up to about the 6 milliliter mark.
Okay,
And then I'll top the other 6 milliliters off with that glycerin mixture. And then, I cap it off and then I just freeze it in a gel line lunchbox. So
okay, there you go. And so when you get ready to use it, you probably would take it out the previous day, let it defrost, and build yourself a little starter. And
no, it's
no,
about for
okay.
me, it's about a 5 day process. I've actually got a string right now on the stern plate. It's WLPO90. I'm actually
Hmm.
getting ready to do an average brew for Brewlosophy. So the brew club, we've got an average brew coming up. It's going to be tiny bottom pale ale, and the thing that we've got with that is we have to change one thing. Well, I've never brewed it, so I'm just going to change the name. That's going to be my one thing. But what I do is so I take my 15 milliliter test tube and I work in variables of tens. And by that, I mean with my 15 mil test tube, I'll toss it into 150 mils of wort. And I'll use like 10, 20, just something to wake it up. And I'll put it on the stir plate, give it about 3 days on that.
Okay.
And then I'll dump that, everything into about 1.3 liters of 1020 wort and let that stir up for about 2 days. And I'll do 2 liters of 1040 wort. So when I say 2 liters, I'm really maybe boiling 500 mils, if it's just a very
Hmm.
concentrated wort, and dump that into my flask. And that usually takes about a day, day and a half. And then I just cold crash it, and then I just treat it like any other starter. As a matter of fact, it works better than any starter I've got from the store. And every time I veer away from that three-step process, my beers get weird. The yeast are
Hmm.
always stressed. So I've
Okay.
heard
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
say, they can just dump that test tube, straight in the starter and start that. Now I've done that and got nothing but phenols and solvents and everything else. So, if I don't stick to my multi-step process, it's usually not good beer. So
No, no, yeah. You got to process, stick to
yes,
it for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. So, how did you get your hands on the Elysian's proprietary house strain?
I wrote them and I said, hey guys, so
Oh,
how
okay,
do I get a hold of this
fair
strain?
enough.
I've tried propping it up from their bottles, because I've seen the proteins and everything up down on the bottom of the bottles. So I just read them and said, hey guys, how do I get a hold of this house strain? I've been trying, to prop this up and I can't get it to take. I'm that weirdo that props up can strains. I've actually got a can of Sierra Nevada's Tropical Hazy. I can't remember the name of it. It's the red can though, and there's not a protein in there. I'm gonna try to prop up whatever yeast strain they have in there and play with it.
Mhm.
But I'm the weirdo that does that, and I'm like, okay, what strain are you guys using? And they actually wrote me back and they said, hey, no, we're over 90 US strains. So imagine that all the way from Washington State to Florida. That's 3,000 some odd miles. But
Yes.
they flew it
Mhm.
down here from FedEx, and I got it on the plate, and then I was able to build it up. And I'd never used an alcohol lamp, or an inoculation loop in my life until then. So I had to figure that out, and I propped it up and then banked it up. And I still haven't used it. I think it's been in the freezer now for like 2 or 3 years, but that's on a to-do list this year. So
That's actually pretty fascinating, yeah. Because I know some places, like you suggest, you just reached out to them and they'll just gladly share with you. I
mhm.
know, like Bell's. I mean, they have their recipes, or at least a few of their recipes on their page. You can just look at them, which is pretty awesome. And of course, with Bell's, you can actually there's enough yeast in the bottles. You didn't need like 3 or 4 bottles. You basically have enough to get a starter going, or at least that's what I've heard. I'm not doing myself. It's something I definitely want to get into because kind of like you said, yeast is not cheap. Even dry yeast has gone up quite a bit. So usually what I do, I'll go buy and I'll invest and buy a bunch, but then I was like, okay, I need to start doing this harvesting stuff, and I just totally forget. My one buddy, he does it, and I think he's on his fifth or sixth cloche, and it's the same yeast from the first time he did it. And he just started brewing. He's like, well, I don't want to spend money. So
Right.
he learned how to harvest it and go down that road. Not me. I need to. I really do. I know I would have wanted to, like, I love Kvike yeast for a lot of stuff.
I'm
Yeah, I
split
enjoy.
on that one.
Are you split
There's
on
some,
it?
yeah, I mean, but I was split on it because of my results with it, and the results that I
Right.
get are different than what the pro brewers get. Because
Hmm.
we've got some breweries here in town that use that turnaround beers in like 48, 72 hours, because of
Yeah.
just the volume, the production volume that they have. And that said, that the results are way better than what I've got at home. But at the same time, that yeast is under way more pressure, liquid pressure and everything else to
Hmm.
help suppress esters and things like that compared to,
Yeah.
what I've got here at the house. So,
Yeah, so I like it with my hard ciders because it gives like a clean slate. It doesn't really impart a lot of other flavors into it. I've noticed, like if I use other like cider yeast or wine yeast, like it imparts other flavors I don't really care for. With Kvike or however you want to say it, it's very clean and neutral. I don't pick up anything that actually tastes like. If I'm making a strawberry one, I taste the strawberries. I'm making strawberry lemon, I get the lemon as well too. That's kind of what I go for. I think I've done a couple of pseudo lagers because I don't really have a good cold side quite yet. It's something I'm still kind of working on. So I do a lot of beers under pressure, which turn out really good. I enjoy them. So I did my pseudo lager under pressure, and it turned out fine. I did a cerveza for a competition. Was it last year or year before last? Yeah, 2024. That turned out pretty good. I actually enjoyed it. I kind of cheated. I pre-limed it, so I went ahead and add lime juice to it. Don't have to worry about it. It turned out pretty good. I enjoyed it. It was a good one. I'd probably do that one again.
speaking of Kvike, I know you said you're working with some fruity experimental hops. A
Yeah.
really good strain to use on that is White Labs Opshog, and just do a two-row smash with or with that hop, and I bet it'd really pop. So
Okay, yeah, I'll have to jot that down later on for sure. So, do you have like a favorite a yeast strain that you go to, like kind of like your go-to?
I really don't, and the reason I say
Okay.
that is I get trendy with it. Sometimes I latch on to one. Well, I like this one,
Mm,
and so the ones that there's one that I'm not particularly fond of, and it's the popular strain that all the which is all the rage, which is the 3470. I'm just not a big fan of that strain.
yeah.
A lot of people love it. I haven't gotten good results with it. And by that, I mean, if I ferment it too low, it gets weird and twangy. If I
Hmm.
ferment it too hot, it's not clean. I get a weird floral note from it. And it's not just my setup. When I go, to a local brewery, I went to one, she was it like 2 years ago, and they had a
Hmm.
blonde, and I tasted that note in there. I knew they had a brewery there, and I said, "Hey, did y'all warm ferment 3470 on this?" Yep. And it's got a signature flavor there. So, I don't care for that. Now, I really mind if I was going to use like a lager yeast or a cold IPA, I don't like 3470. I used
Hmm.
S189 here recently and just absolutely
Hmm.
loved it. So I wouldn't use that for anything malty. It does tend to dry out that beer, because it
Hmm.
really attenuates, but it drops a little quicker. It is a workhorse. So I love that. And I
Hmm.
think I fermented that at 54 Fahrenheit something. Yeah, it's 54 Fahrenheit. Of course, with a
Hmm.
D-rest, but I did that. And what I used on that was a two-row out of 7 smash because I was like, hey, I just want to learn this yeast. I didn't get the
Hmm.
weird sulfur that you sometimes pull or those citrus note that you can get 3470. I didn't get that weird lemony note from it. And it's
Hmm.
not just the dry strain. I get that from WLP 830 and then the Omega German Lager 1 DKO as well. So there's
Hmm.
something with the 3470 strain, and it is finicky. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's no. So the dried version from Menace, I have not had luck with repitching that. I've not had luck with propagating that. I even went so far as to do, build it up for my bank. And
Hmm.
it's great on the initial pitch, but every other way, I get nothing but phenols from it. Clove, clove, clove.
Really?
And I reached out to a member in the brew club, and they work with yeast and everything for a living. They said, yeah, they have the same experiences with that. So, I'm not a fan of that dry strain. But like I said, if I had to choose a dry lager strain, it would be 7189. For L's, I'm all over the place. And the reason I say that is I work in a set of threes. So what I'll do is, I'll prop up whatever strain I'm in the mood for. And, I'll usually brew something like a blonde ale, something real low OG. Then,
Mhm.
I'll rack my beer off that. I'll pitch something directly onto that cake, medium OG, rack that off. And then, my final beer will be something a little heavier. So, that way I'm slowly stepping it up.
Mm.
So, I
That makes
try to
sense.
plan my brew days in advance there so I can do that. So, but yeah, like I said, I'm all over the place with L strains. It's just whatever I'm in the mood for at the time. So,
Well, that makes very no. See, you're not the only one that's talked about the 3470 because I've used it. I think in both of my pseudo loggers that I've done, and I feel like in my homebrew club, there's some people say they didn't really care for it, and they didn't describe it exactly the way you did. But it's just interesting to hear people say that. I know some people don't care for like USO5 or USO4. I mean, I don't mind those. I think they're fine for what they are. I think I used a USO5 for my stout. I actually won a medal for that one. So I mean, so it turned out fine for me. Um, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place with yeast right now. I'm still learning. I don't have a whole lot of brew badges underneath my belt. Again, I've been doing this for I'm just counting up as maybe 5 years this April, but I've only done maybe 30 batches of beer. So it's really not a whole lot to give me a whole lot of time to really experiment, right? So um I've done like I said, I think smash beers, I still want to get more into it. I talk about it all the time, but I just don't do it. I need to. I think just 1 gallon batches would be perfect just to kind of see what does this bring to the table. Um I don't think that's an easy way for somebody to kind of get started with home brewing too if they want to switch to all grain. Just do a smash beer, just get some, go to your homebrew shop, you have one local, and just buy some two row or Mare's Odd or whatever you want to be your base malt and just find a hop that sounds interesting and figure out a schedule and how you want to do it. So it's not that hard. So your stovetop brewery, definitely kind of want to get into that. So you brought up you use a paint strainer bag, you have the under sink garden hose hookup for your indoor counterfloor chiller. Like, how does all this work together? I'm actually pretty fascinated by this.
so that is a setup that I used for about 5 years before I got my
Okay.
all-in-one system. So
Okay.
what I use was what's in the South we call them like shrimp boiler, crab boiler pots like
Huh.
that, but they're little 5 gallon
Mhm.
pots. And so, I've got those. And so I had two 5 gallon pots and I figured out my boil off rate. But what I would use for mashing for my mash bag is I just use 5 gallon paint strainer bags. And that way,
Mhm.
when I'm done with it, I can dump my grains, soak them out, she clean, let them air out, boom, done. I can reuse them because they're dirt cheap. I think I still have the original ones I used from 5 years ago, and they
Oh
probably
wow.
had 70 some odd batches on them. So, but yeah, I did that because couldn't afford the all-in-one system at the time.
Yeah.
And now, as far as chilling that was interesting. Like I said, it's like the universe knows. So, not long after I started doing that, one of those ice machines opened up, literally like 3, 4 houses down from me. So I just bring a 60-gallon cooler out there and top it off with ice, and then just put ice in the sink to cool the wort down, and then I just dump the wort in my bucket or carboy, whatever
Mhm.
whatever I was using to
Mhm.
ferment it, and that's exactly what I would do, and then let the fridge finish cooling it off, and so
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Yeah, I think because I bought my first kit that I bought was from Northern Brewer, and I think it comes with like a 3 gallon pot if I remember correctly. Then basically you add an extra 2 gallons of water to it to get to the 5 gallon mark. So I did say I did stovetop, but after that, I think that initial batch, I was like, no, I'm just gonna do all grain. I looked at a bunch of different systems out there. I didn't have the money for an all-in-one. I saw like the 3 tier systems. I saw those for sale on Facebook a few different times. I saw people meshing in and or I guess steeping rather in like coolers and stuff like that. I was like, I don't want to deal with all that. It's like I know how to make tea. I drink a lot of tea. I know how to make tea. So I got like a brew. Actually, I did buy a paint strainer. I bought something very similar to I think off Amazon. I got myself like a 6 gallon pot or something like that, and that's what I use. And now I have like 8 gallon pot, and now I have like a better bag. I think it's like brew bag or something like that. It was like $50 or $40 or so, something like that. And that's what I do. I think for me, it's simple, it's easy. I know how to make tea. I let it sit for an hour, check on the temperature every once in a while, stir it every once in a while, and be done with it. Really. So you say you brought a an all at once. Which one did you go with?
So I went with the Brazilla. So I went with the Brazilla
Okay. Yeah.
4.0, and
Hmm.
now I've got the 4.1. And again, like I said, it's just things that I looked into. So the 4.0, I ran into some issues with the where the plug hooks up with the unit itself. It kept burning out,
Mm.
and it's just a unfortunately it's a weak point on those systems. So Morebeer actually covered the replacement and sent me a 4.1 unit, and so I've been using this one now for like 2 years, heavy use. And
Right.
I love it because this has
Yeah.
got the sight glass on the side, so I'm not having to peek my head in, to see, hey, is this hit the 7 gallon or the 25-liter free bowl mark? I don't have to do that. I can just look on a little sight glass and see. So that's been nice.
Well, that's awesome. Actually, that's really cool. So you're doing self glycolysis. It's a system. How'd you build that?
I didn't. That's another thing that I looked into.
Okay.
So yeah, so there was a guy, it was a Navy guy actually. His
Mhm.
name was Matt. And it's so weird how this worked out. I was actually at Alga with Carson, the only brew day I've ever been up there with him. And I brought a New Zealand Pills up there. He's brewing a hazy, and he goes, man, he said, there's two guys in town now that I know of that are really good brewers. He said, there's this guy named Matt, and then it's you. And so I wrote the McGuire's Brewers because McGuire's is right down the road from Alga. So I'm like, hey, I'm at Alga, well, bring us some. So I ended up bringing them some, and guess who happens to be there? That Matt guy I'd never met, before. So I ended up running into him, and then a couple months later, he's getting he's moving out of the area. And anyways, I guess the brewer said, "Hey, Ryan could use glycol," and so I get a random message, "Hey, would you like a glycol system?" And I thought, well, he was wanting me to buy it, so I was like, "Yeah, no." And then he said, "No, I'll give it to you." Okay. So I ended up getting that, and what he did is he hacked together one of those window units and a cooler and
Mm,
pond pumps, things like that. So, but like I
right.
said, I just happened to absolutely look into it, which I was, yeah, okay, I'll get it for free. So,
Heck yeah, dude. That's awesome. Yeah, somebody's looking up for you in this hobby for sure. That is so awesome. Oh man, that's I would like to have one, not a professional one. I would probably do it myself. I watched a couple of videos where people take old window shakers and a cooler and put this stuff like that. So it doesn't look too difficult. But my problem is like when I hobby, I go all in. This is the only hobby where I'm dragging my feet. Like I'm taking my time buying anything. I'm just dragging it out. Because I think if I bought all the cool shiny stuff, I'd probably get burned myself out and be like, yeah, I'm done. I'm gonna go do something else. I think by taking my time, I can appreciate some of the struggles, some of the disasters that kind of creep up a little bit. Uh, some of the beers that don't turn out so well. So, try to figure out what went wrong. And I don't mind buying used equipment because I feel like buying used equipment, it's usually kept up fairly well anyways. So I was talking about like disasters in the brewery. You mentioned you had a recirculating pump that kind of crapped out on you midday with your Brewzilla. What,
I
was
got to
that the
put
story
this
you were?
yeast up real quick. It's
Oh,
about to
go
blow
for
on
it.
me.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
let me
want
get back
that.
in here. No, I heard that lid pop and I saw it come out, and the fan's not coming off. So there,
Even better. I'm keeping that in. That's a great little
yeah, I heard that. I
little.
thought it was a relay, and I'm like, nope, it's
No, this thing's gonna blow.
yeah.
Yeah. So my question was, you talk about a recirculation pump failed mid brew day with your Brewzilla. Was that what you were just talking about like a second ago, or was
So
that something
that
different?
So that was actually on the second Brazil that I had, and that one only lasted
Okay.
one batch. So the first Brazil I had, the pump failed. They sent another one, and that pump fell. Well, the pump fell on the first one, and
Mhm.
my board burned out, and it all had to do with that where the cord connected to the unit. So on
Yeah.
my second one, I didn't even get one brew day in. I was brewing a Sierra Nevada clone, and so
Hmm.
the two beers that always give me trouble, no matter when I brew them, Sierra Nevada clone and the Bell's Two Hearted clone. And it's just every time I brew that, something
Really?
goes wrong. So that day my recirculation pump died. So
Hmm.
I had to put it up on a freezer, and get my wort into a fermenter and let gravity. It was a pain.
But you
And
were
it was
able to salvage it, though, right?
it wasn't the best beer though. It turned out way more bitter than
Mm.
it should have because isomer the bitter word I can't think of. It's the
Yeah.
I one, the isomer
Yes.
that one.
Isomerization.
That one right there,
Yeah.
yeah. But so I wasn't able to pull a lot of the citrus from that. I just got a lot of bitterness from the hops because the citrus just cooked off, and so
Oh,
it just wasn't
yeah.
that.
No, yeah, that sucks. Yeah, I don't have any pumps with my systems yet. I thought about it. thought about adding one like a couple different times, but it's also like, do I want one extra thing to clean? I
Mhm.
don't know if I want one more thing to clean like quite yet. So yeah, that had to be terrifying when when the first Brazilla cord just kind of melted on you. Like, were you close by when that happened, or were you just happened to walk by? Like, what does that smell?
Well, it wasn't that I didn't know until the end of the brew day. So I went to
Oh
unplug it from the
wow.
wall. And then
Hmm.
I unplugged the plug from the wall, and the Brazillas of Gen 4s don't have an on-off switch. You just unplug it from the wall, and that's what I always do. So I unplugged it from the wall, and I went to unplug the cord from the unit. It was essentially fused in place. So I had to wiggle it off, and I looked, and there was a huge burn mark. And it's always the same
Mm.
prong, and I can't, I want to say it's the left prong, but it's the one that connects to the white and blue wire that goes to the board. And
Hmm.
ask me how I know because I had to undo that so many times. So,
Wow.
but the fix for it that I've run into, and I know a lot of people are hardwiring there, is just to use a heavier gauge PC cord on that
Hmm.
unit, something, so you don't to cut down on that resistance where that connection is. And
Oh,
I've been using
makes
that
sense.
cord, yeah, it's like a 15 gauge cord or something like that. I've been using that now for a year and a half, and I haven't had any issues with that. So
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that would freak me out a little bit too. I think one nice thing because I'm up in Tennessee, so I'm not too far from you overall, but I still get cold. I get snow right during the winter months. It would be nice to have like an electric system because it is a pain in the butt to try to fight in my garage when it's 50 degrees and wrapping it with like two different blankets, trying to keep it nice and warm and it's just a pain in the butt. So another disaster that you mentioned was I have a hard time saying this word as well, but chlorophenols.
oh, chlorophenols, yes.
Yes.
So, yeah, I fought that for about a year, and I was going to the brewers at McGuire's,
Mm,
and bringing these beers. We're trying to figure out where in my process am I getting this? Is it an infection? What's going on here? So I ended up writing the water company here,
mm,
and come to find out, they're using chloramines in the water. And so no matter how much filtering I'm doing, even RO, which I've got an RO machine across the street that I use, that would get down to like 1 TDS or something like that, but
mm,
still wasn't pulling those chloramines out. So I started using Campton, no issues, ever since. And so I
mm.
just any water that touches my beer, even when it comes to the sanitizer, gets Campton. Everything gets Campton.
I guess better be safe than sorry for sure. It's fairly cheap solution too, right? Overall, so,
Yeah,
especially if throwing oil brewer away. Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually, again, like I said, it's weird how things work out. So a brewery opened up across the street from me, about 6 houses down. And I was talking to Brewer before they opened up, and
Mm,
he got a water report. And our water here is essentially bare. I mean, on a bad day, I might pull like 32, 35 TDS unfiltered. I mean, it's just
mm,
crazy salt here. And I told him, I said, man, I know you're using RO and your setup out there, but I said, make sure you're using Campton. I said, because they do use chloramines out here. I said, I haven't had any way to get rid of it. Some of the brewers, their approach, I know Pensacola is I want to say they heat up their water to like 180 and let it sit overnight to drop all the minerals out and things like that. But
mm.
I haven't had much luck with any of that, so I just use Campton. It's instant, and I'm good.
Oh yeah, for sure. So there was another I don't know if it was a mistake or disaster that you had. Like you said, you forgot to add in your mite or your malt pipe. Like, well, what happened that day? Were you just in a hurry or?
I just wasn't thinking. I was
Ah,
relaxed.
okay.
I was actually brewing
Mm-hmm.
the Centennial Blonde, the beer munch for Centennial
Mm-hmm.
Blonde. So thankfully, it wasn't a hefty grain bill. It was like less than 10 pounds. But I got in there and I realized as soon as I did it, I
Mm-hmm.
could see the numbers on the unit, the gallon markers. I just did that. I ended up with the unit, picking it up and draining all the water into buckets and getting my grains out of there, and then just re-getting it, got everything ready again. But yeah, that was just a matter of time before it happened to me. And I had a good 7 year streak, nothing, boom, just out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. See, that's what I hear about like infections in beers. Like you get to a point where you've done stuff so much that you start to get relaxed and then you forget to sanitize one time, like your fermenting bucket and it's just, you have baby diaper a beer
Yeah.
basically. There's no hot garbage, whatever, right? So I am but super anal. I'm like I start my sanitizing my bucket right when I start, heating up my water. Or it's just because like there's so much downtime, right? So I pick it up and shake it. I walk by, pick it up and shake it again. So I'm like throughout the time, like I shaked it probably at least 15 minutes throughout the whole the whole brew day instead of like the 45 seconds or whatever contact or 60 seconds it needs to actually work.
So are you
So
using Star San for your sanitizer?
yeah, I am,
So
man.
Do you reuse it or do you just dump it when you're done?
So I make a 5 gallon bucket of it, and that way I can make it last. I think it was a Brulosophy. I think it's good for almost a month at a time. I think if I remember correctly, something like that. So I let it sit for at least a couple weeks to 3 weeks, so I can still reuse it on other projects. Plus, I don't brew a whole lot either, so there's that as well. So I do let it sit around for a while. But yeah, so like after I like so cause I usually pour like probably about a half gallon into my fermenting bucket. That way I can actually pick it up, kind of shake it around. But that I do just pitch. Like I don't save that; it goes away.
I know this sounds bad, but mine lasts probably 4 months, and it gets heavy
Okay.
use between yeast blast, fermenter,
Yeah.
you name it. It touches everything. I'm very very particular with my sanitizer because if I'm putting that much work in a batch, I don't want to find out that it's ruined
Mm,
after
yeah, because of
fermentation.
that.
And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. That's very true. It is a very interesting hobby. Like, I think I've said this so far in every podcast, so I must keep up with it. So, we have a cleaning hobby or sanitation hobby that produces alcohol because we spend more time cleaning, washing, sanitizing, storing our equipment than actually, brewing the stuff. It seems like it's just we do so much like prep and and post prep work just to make sure because I mean we're making food,
oh yeah,
essentially at the end of the day, that's what it is. You don't want to get away sick. You don't want to get yourself sick, right? And you also don't want to, even if you only spend $20 on a smash beer, you don't want to waste $20 on beer going
no,
bad. So that's $20 wasted. Man, they could go sell something else. So you said you had a 7 year streak. So this question is kind of, I guess, post 7 years. So are you still having little disasters every once in a while, or?
no. I know a lot of people like to drink when they brew. The only thing I'm
Yeah,
drinking is like water or coffee for
yeah.
numerous reasons. One of them is I'm getting older, so if I bend weird and get hurt and do something stupid and end up in
Mm-hmm.
the ER, I don't want to have to tell them I had this. I want them to be able to treat
Yeah.
me and keep me comfortable.
Uh-huh.
But the other part of it is I want to completely focus on what I'm doing because I've
Yep.
spent this so much time developing a recipe, building up a yeast strain, propping that up. I want to make sure what I'm brewing is going to be what I want to drink at the end of the day. I don't want to
100%.
have an oops because oh well I had this beer. No, I want to focus
Mm-hmm.
100% on what I'm doing.
Yeah, I pretty much follow that rule. There's been a couple of times where I cracked a beer while I was brewing, and that was usually the first time I did a double brew day. I'll never do that again. That was just too much for me. I was just like you said, I'm getting older, right? So like I have arthritis in my shoulders, so I have a hard time picking up the brew bags. I have a winch, so I use a winch to to pull it up. But I had a beer that day just because I was just whooped, just running back and forth, cleaning this, cleaning that, getting this going. Because they were both competition beers, and I was like pushing that deadline where like I got to get this done today so I can enter into the competition. I'm not doing that again. There's just no way. It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. It was just horrible. But like my cousin, I don't know if you get a chance, if you want to listen to my first episode on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, sometimes he does 3 beers in one day. Yeah. So like that blew my mind. I was like, man, there's just no way. And he bottles everything too, which is quite fascinating. So that's what, at least 150 bottles, right? Plus or minus,
Oh,
something like that, right? So just like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, man. So we talked about kegging. So the next time we go up, I go up to Michigan, maybe we'll sit down and design like a cheap little keezer or kegerator or something like that, like to kind of get them started. Because I told him that it's so nice just to walk over to your keezer, you just pour off a pint and be done with it.
Yep.
And it's only one vessel you got to clean versus if it's 5 gallon batch, at least 48 bottles. I mean, so like I'd rather clean to one keg than 48 bottles all over again. I still bottle condition some things, because I want them. I forgot what it was off the top of my head. So let's see, I did like a barrel aged stout. I tried to do for a friend. I'm not at that age, a little while, and then bottles of herb. I shared it with them. So I definitely want to talk about like this brewlosophy thing. So you sent me the link. I went to the minute mark. I listened, and I forgot how goofy brewlosophy was a few years ago. You're just just a bunch of cut up people, and I love the nickname they gave you, Duct Tape Brian. And I hope your garage brewery is called Duct Tape Ryan because that's like the best name I've ever heard. So let's talk about the duct tape on bottles.
Sure. Sure. So it all boils down to I don't have a printer. So,
Mhm.
I was like, what do I have sitting around being from the South? I'm just going to use a Sharpie and duct tape and just label it and send it off.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, so that was actually an alt beer. I'd never brewed an alt beer before.
Oh,
And the
nice.
pub,
Yeah.
yeah, the pub's proprietary strain, the history's muddied on that. So,
Hmm.
they think it's some kind of German ale strain. And so I thought, man, I bet that would kill an alt beer. So, I ended up picking their brains on, okay, what would you do for an alt beer? And really, the input that they had was go all spalt hops. So, I bought like a pound of
Mm.
spalt, went all spalt hops and then just kind of, use the guidelines that the brew
Hmm.
club released there, and I, brewed with that with the step mash, and
Hmm.
it turned out really good. I'm not a dark beer drinker, but that was really good. And I just thought it was funny because
Oh,
they were, you know, oh, this duct tape bottle, and like I'm a white cracker. I'm like, they're just giving me just
oh, they
everything under
are.
the sun.
Oh
And
my
then
gosh. Yeah.
all of a sudden, Marshall's like, oh, okay, have you tried this?
Hmm.
Oh,
Yep. They were like, "Oh, this is like the best amber I've ever had." I'm like, "Okay, that's really cool." But I love the name Duct Tape Ryan. I'm like, man, I hope that's the name of his brewery now. Because I would just run with that the whole time. Because I use blue tape. I
oh,
use
dude.
the yeah, and I do have a printer. So the only time I print labels off is if I'm giving the bottles to special people. So like again, so like my cousin, right? So
Yeah.
like I would that he would get like the printed label. Everyone else is just a piece of the duct tape, a big old fat Sharpie right on the boom. This is what it is. Here you go. You got beer. Uh, so were you kind of nervous waiting on the feedback from them or
No,
excited? No.
No, I just, honestly, I forgot about it. To
Okay.
me, I don't even do beer competitions because to
Mm-hmm.
me, I want to produce something that tastes good to me. And the best feedback that I can get personally is, take advantage of the situation that I have, with McGuire's. Let those guys taste it,
Mm-hmm.
get their feedback because, they know their stuff. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what these guys do for a living. They pull in awards and like, okay, you know, teach me. So I'm always bringing things. And like I said, the biggest compliment that I've gotten yet from those guys is to watch the head brewer go back for thirds on a beer. Not the, oh, this is good. Didn't get any of that. I just saw him pouring out of the growler a third
You
glass.
get another one. Heck yeah. Dude, that's
So to
so
me,
awesome.
that's just that's what I aim for is, I want to make something that everybody enjoys. I don't really care, what a judge says because judging it's funny. So beer judging, I imagine, is just as subjective as judging with music because I do the music competitions.
Mm-hmm.
So you're basing your entire recipe and your entire process off of somebody's palate. Or in music, you're basing your entire set, your playing style off of somebody or somebody's palate. So what sounds or
Mm-hmm.
tastes great to one person may not taste good at all to the other person. And so like I said, it's just so subjective. That's really it. I just didn't want to waste my time with it.
No, that's totally understand. No, I totally get that as well too. Because I feel like, I mean, I've been a beer drinker for way too long, 30 years probably. Yeah, that sounds right. And I don't think my palate's that great. Like I don't pick up things to other people. Now, if someone says, "Oh, I think I taste green apple," and I'll look at them for a minute and like, I didn't taste that. And I'll go back and I'll taste it, and I'll sit there and I kind of let it just kind of coat the tongue a little bit and so slowly swallow it. I'm like going, okay, so maybe I do get a little bit of green apple, but like I don't think my palate's that's not that refined. So yeah, so like you, I like to try to brew what I think I'm going to enjoy, but I also like to experiment though as well too. I just have that um part of my brain. It's like to try different things. Like I've always gotten great compliments on my ciders. Everyone seems to really like my ciders. Like they always say I pick good flavor profiles. I don't think I pick great flavor profiles. I just think like if I want this cider, how do I want to taste? So for example, I made a cranberry heart cider for the Christmas holiday. Probably one of the best ciders I think I've made to date. So think it's 2 gallons to 1 gallon. So 2 gallons of apple juice, 1 gallon to cranberry juice. I use a quarter cup of brown sugar, 2 cinnamon sticks, 2 inches of ginger, and a can of apple concentrate. And to just so the apple concentrate with the other spices that I mentioned, I'd simmer that for a while, so I reduce it maybe by 20% or so. And I added that to that, and it did. It turned out really, really good. It's got a really pretty pink color to it. Um, but like most ciders, it always has that rhino fart smell to it. So you just got to let it, you know, you got to degas it every once in a while, or purge the keg every once in a while, try to get it out, or just give it time. You know, my youngest child, he seemed to really like it. Him and his buddies came by and got like, I filled out like three bottles, maybe two wine bottles of it. They had a blast with it. And so speaking like of experimentations and stuff like that, when you start building your own recipes, are you more methodical or do you like to experiment, or is it a combination of both?
So I really don't lean to experimenting because I kind of want to know what
Okay.
I'm getting, what end product's going to be. But when I build
Okay.
my recipes, you know, I laugh because the my first homebrew recipe that I brought to those brewers, they and I didn't understand it at the time, but now I understand why they were laughing at it because it probably had 10 different grains in there. And one of my base malt was probably 90% of everything, and the other grains were like maybe, a quarter pound each at most. So I was basically taught to retool my way of thinking, keep it simple, like for a blonde, maybe do, think of percentages. So for a blonde, maybe do 95% base malt,
Mm-hmm.
5%, caramel malt, like a light caramel. So, I'll take those percentages and I work off of that. And then and for what OG I'm looking for, what OG am I looking
Mm-hmm.
for? So for a blonde, I'm looking for something that's kind of in the mid to low 1040s, or if
Mm-hmm.
I'm brewing a pale ale, I might want to shoot, for something 1048, 1053, somewhere in there, or an IPA, you can go as high as you want with that. But like I said, I mainly work off percentages. But one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I have that I've been doing here recently with my hop additions that I've liked in my IPAs is I don't add any more bittering additions, because with the old school IPAs, you get your first wort hops or 60-minute edition,
Mm-hmm.
or if you went with your Midwestern IPAs, you didn't add hops until 45 minutes, and then went from there. But that 15-minute edition, Whirlpool and then dry hops, really good, and I really like the results I'm getting from that. It's just a smoother flavor, smoother bitterness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that sounds great. So it sounds like you're really interested in like, ingredient selection, right? So do you spend time like reading any of the spec sheets on the ingredients that you look at? So this could be hops, malts, yeast, adjuncts, whatever. So you know more of what you're getting yourself into based on what the spec sheets say, or whatever they're called.
Well, for the malts, I really don't, to be honest with you. I just go
Mm-hmm.
with whatever's cheaper. But that said,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm brewing a German beer, I just tend to stick with my German or at least European malts. So
Mm-hmm.
here recently, for my German beers, I might be using Environment for a base malt. Say if I need a little bit of Munich here, a little bit of Vienna, I've been leaning more into the Viking malts because that's just what's been cheaper on more beers. I lean more into that. Now, post-production
Yeah.
brewing would be a whole different story, but for what I'm doing, I'm not trying to sell to a crowd. And, even though at the end of the day, I might be saving, $2 on 5 pounds, it is what it is. And I just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm, I don't know that I could tell the difference unless I really did side by side, well, this is Viking unit, this is Byron unit, or, something like that, or this is best malls. I don't know that I'd be able to really pick at it. So
Right. Yeah, I've met a few people that are diehard, like I only buy this brand of malt. Um, and I don't quite understand. I think I'm a pretty, I would say, somewhat frugal when it comes to buying multiple too. Like, I don't necessarily always buy like the cheapest because sometimes I've looked at some stores and go to the cheapest and it's like it's a name I've not really seen around before. So then I find myself going down that rabbit hole, and a lot of people say, "Well, I wouldn't recommend buying that." So I stick with like, I'm drawing a blank on some names right now. I would say like middle of the road, I guess. So I try not to get too much into like the $3.5, per pound malts if I can help it. But some of those special malts you kind of got to spend because of, well, they have to do certain things to them to make them obviously special. So like, then I don't mind. But like for like base malt, I'm not too really concerned about it. And if I miss my OG a little bit, well, I can always add a little bit of dry malt extract or some honey or maple syrup, whatever to kind of bump up the, that ABV just, or excuse me, the OG up just a little bit. So, do you have a house beer by chance? Do you keep on
I
stock?
I don't.
Ah,
I rotate so many because I'm a hoarder when it comes to hops, when it comes to malt, especially with yeast. So I just
yeah.
I'm more of an inventory based brewer. So I'll look at the inventory I have, and
Hmm.
then, okay, what do I have? And then I'll pick a yeast that kind of matches that inventory. And then, like I said, I'll try to do about 3 beers. It's a one off, and I feel like being lazy and using dry yeast, which is a extreme rarity. But usually I'm basing it off of my yeast bank, off a freezer bank. So I'm having to think. about a month and a half, 2 months ahead of brew days.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to space it off of my inventory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of have a house beer. Well, actually, I think I have two house beers. I don't make them as often, but I don't. They're not like always on. They're not always in my keys, but they're definitely in my rotation at least twice a year. And that's my cream ale, and I do a blueberry honey ale. They're definitely great summer beers for the most part. Um, I think I might change my honey blueberry just a little bit because you don't get a whole lot of blueberry flavor, right? You don't get no berry flavor at all. So I talked to one gentleman. He said, "Yeah, I'll suggest adding like some blackberry puree to it to kind of get that berry flavor. Because it's not really the blueberry. Because blueberry doesn't have a whole lot of flavor, and it's kind of true. 'Cause blueberries are kind of hit and miss when it comes to flavor. Like you go to the store, you eat one, you're like, oh, this one's super blueberry flavor. You eat another one, like, oh, this is just tart. Right? So I was like, well, that's not a bad idea. So I'm gonna have to try that because we have what's called Hoppy Possum here in it's in Bristol, Tennessee, and I've gone a few times. So I think I'm going to enter this year. I don't expect to win anything, but I definitely want to serve. I think it'd be pretty interesting to see what other people think of what my beer tastes like, besides my buddies that get free beer.
Yeah.
So,
So,
but
so I got a question for you. So you're
sure.
not throwing blueberry. Have you ever tried using boysenberry?
No, I've not even thought of it. I don't even know what boysenberry tastes like.
So I don't either, but I can tell you some of the local breweries here have used boysenberry, even though it's blueberry, because they get
Hmm.
more blueberry flavor from the boysenberry extract. So
Okay, maybe I'll have to try that then as well. Yeah, exactly. I need to start making a few different batches now, so I know because it's in September is when the competition. So I need to start experimenting and trying to figure out what tastes good, what doesn't taste good. Then I have I call it apple pie cider. I swear to God, it tastes just like apple pie, just missing the crust. Right? It's so good. I really enjoy it. And again, that was just another experimental one. I was like, okay, what does apple pie have in it? And so I started going like the ingredients of what apple pie has in it. I was like, well, let me take those ingredients and let's just put this in a cider and boom, bada bing. I took it to like a homebrew competition and I won with that too. So like, all right. And that was I didn't know homebrew competition was going on that day. It's like, yeah, we're doing fall flavors. So I'm like, oh, well, I have this cider. So is there something that you're, let's see, how do I want to phrase this question? What is something you do now in your brewing process that would have blown in your 10 years ago Ryan's brain?
water salts, big time.
Yeah, there you go.
Water
Yeah, that's a good one.
salts and
Yeah.
basically brewing water, that spreadsheet,
Mhm,
big difference. And if you
mhm,
if you don't think it is, brew a tea with just straight up distilled water or your tap water, then brew a
mhm,
tea with, with just saying, an amber balancer, amber multi water profile. Or other good ones, if you brew a coffee with just plain tap water, then brew it
mhm.
with like, a stout profile and just see what you get. My wife was, I can't taste anything, and then so I set these things down. I said, try it. She said, I know that when you dark, what's not going to be good. And I said, which one do you like? That one. I said, well, guess which one that one was? The one that I dorked with.
No, I agree 100%. So I use Brewfather, and I think they do a really good job on their water profiles. So I use distilled water myself. I know it's costly, but I like the blank slate. uh, that it brings. Do a lot of painting as well. Not too long ago, like I said, now I got arthritis in my shoulder. It's kind of hard to paint, but like it's nice to have that blank canvas, and then I can build on top of that canvas and then present something. I do have kind of like a go-to profile that I use for the most part for some of my water profiles because I'm a programmer by trade, so I work really hard to be lazy. So yeah, you laugh, and I know you're an IT person. We're going to get into that for a second. You may relate to this. Like most programmers work really hard to solve this one problem to never deal with it again. So when I worked on my water profile for the beers I make, I worked really hard on that water profile, so I don't have to mess with it no more. so so you're an IT professional, kind of like me. I'm just it's more of a personal thing. So what do you do for a living within IT?
So now I work in the cloud space. I've worked in the
Oh,
cloud
nice.
environment, Microsoft cloud environment for about 15, well, I'd say 15, probably more like 17 years now.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I originally, and it's weird seeing everything go back to the cloud side of things when everybody fought so hard to do everything on-prem, all the way to
Hmm.
Exchange, you name it. And nope, we're going to save money and put it all right back in the cloud. So, but yeah, I'm a Microsoft 365. I'm basically working the cloud. So
Oh, nice. That is awesome. Man. Yeah. So I currently work at, we deal with like AWS as our cloud. infrastructure, but I've worked for other companies where they use Azure as their cloud infrastructure. One company actually I worked for to use Google, which I thought was pretty interesting. They use Google for the government side for the product that they were selling because I think they had a better government setup. I thought that was pretty interesting because I never really looked at, but they're all about the same from what I can tell. Like the names are different. The only bad thing I noticed about AWS is they're constantly retiring services to bring out new services too fast. So once you get used to one thing, they've already retired it and they already brought out something so something new. So you have to refigure out how to do everything again. It's just a big old pain in the butt. So this leads me to this question. So with what you're doing and I'm doing, I'm willing to bet that your tech background influences the way that you approach brewing.
Not exactly, because the
Really?
reason I
Okay.
say that is, with my tech background now, it's weird. I originally started out as help desk, back in
Mm-hmm.
I was Navy Civil Service and I did some Army contracting, I was working for a
Mm.
DoD contractor. Then I moved to the cloud and so I guess you could say it does tie into it a little bit because if something goes wrong, I pick and pick and dig and dig. What did I
Mm-hmm.
do? Where did I do this in my process? So I'll
Mm-hmm.
go, that I'll just take I guess you're right. I'll take my troubleshooting background from there and what did I do and just start picking
Mm-hmm.
everything apart. And so until I figure out, what did I do? Here's how I fixed it. And, that is, I guess, kind of a process that I do apply to it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I feel like a lot of our personal lives and career lives as well too definitely goes into our hobby quite a bit because we just take what I know how to do this pretty well. I'm having this issue right here. How can I take what I already know and try to figure this out? And I think having an analytical brain definitely helps out a lot, though, too. Even a scientific brain. Like I said, when I talked to that pharmacist, a lot of his chemistry background have really helped out. Going through some of the stuff. But I think he also said, if I remember correctly, also made some of the processes a little bit harder because he was so focused on. He's like, well, I don't need to make it this complicated. Maybe I'll start backing off just a little bit. And then you realize, okay, this is more my sweet spot. I like this a little bit better. You also mentioned that you love cooking, and cooking and brewing are pretty to me kind of hand in hand, right? Because cooking cooking is not like baking, and for those that don't know, they're probably saying, what you guys talking about? The baking you have to be very spot on, right? You can't deviate from making a cake or a cookie. But when you're cooking, you can add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that, and you can make a steak. $2 steak tastes like a $10 steak, basically. And I feel like there is a parallel between that and brewing. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%, definitely.
Yeah.
Because you get, just like with brewing, you get to put your flavor in what you're making food wise,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's all goes back to the gear too, with brewing. Maybe you're brewing like I was when I first started, on the stove,
Mm-hmm.
and then your brews get better when you moved in all at one system with more temperature control, you can tighten things up, to where maybe you're cooking on the stove top of one thing and then you move to cast iron, see the differences here. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, it absolutely ties into it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Have you so I just thought of this question. Have you ever planned an event? So I guess what I want to ask is like, have you ever planned a food for an event and a beer to go with that event? So I'm thinking like a
Every
barbecue
year.
every
Yeah,
year.
every
There
year,
you go.
multiple
Heck
times.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what I like to do, and we don't really host a lot of people short of, a few family members, but like
Mm-hmm.
Cinco de Mayo, I'll plan some, I might have like a cream ale or
Mm-hmm.
something like that on tap, or
Mm-hmm.
4th of July, I might do a round of German beers, 4 German beers, something like that. Definitely Oktoberfest, we'll plan that, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll usually do brats with the grandkids, and let do some
Oh, that's
grilling and
awesome.
cheese
Yeah.
dip, and we'll just kind of design it around that. But it's
Mm-hmm.
always something, to me it keeps it interesting because it keeps me goal oriented. That way, hey, I've got this. What do I want to do for this? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very cool. Now, uh, this part I don't recall that I'm ahead. Are you part of a homebrew club or are you not a part of a homebrew club?
yes and no. So I'm part of
Fair
the
enough.
Brew Club online, which we intermingle with philosophy. Now we
Mm,
had a local brew club here in Milton called Mash, but that's unfortunately quit flash in the pan. It started just as a lot of
mm,
the homebrew clubs were running into issues. So and Milton itself is a smaller area, and we've got a larger brew club in Pensacola, the Escambia Bay Homebrewers.
Mhm.
But where they get up, it's about an hour from where I'm at. So with
Mm.
Milton, it was
Yeah.
about 15 minutes from the house where we were meeting. So it was a lot easier for me to meet up. And now, that I do the online club at the brew club, it's even more convenient than that. So
Now, do you ship some of your beers to those people for them to try?
So I've shipped a beer to Martin with
Okay.
Brewlosophy. I can't
Mhm.
remember his last name, but it's Martin. He does the Brewlosophy show.
Oh, Martin Keene?
Yeah, Martin Keene. I shipped
Yeah.
him an amber, and this is when he had a woman on there, and I can't remember her name, but I liked the input that she had because it's interesting hearing, the input from brewers and people with homebrew. And a lot of times, it's just our nature to get pretentious about things. And it was great to have the unbiased of, is this good or not? Not
Mhm.
I taste this or I taste that or make this better here. And it was my first amber, and it was probably one of the worst beers I've ever brewed. And she was the first one to call it out. She, oh, this was horrible. But I appreciated that feedback because that's what I look for.
Yeah.
When I'm designing beer, I look for the analytical side of things. But when it's done, I don't
Mhm.
care about that. I want to know, is it good or not? Just like in a production brewery, is this going to make you money, or is this going to sit and take up space? At the end of the day, your customer's not going to
Yeah.
come in and say, "Well, I taste this or that." No, this is really good beer. Here, try this. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of the approach that I take to my recipes and my processes. So
No, it's like, yeah, yeah, you definitely seek out advice or feedback, positive or negative. Like that part doesn't really matter so much. You want the feedback so you can improve your craft, which sounds like you've been doing great for the past, you know, decade now. So we're going to kind of switch gears. We're going to talk about advice for homebrewers themselves. So if someone listening and thinking about brewing their first batch, what advice would you get them or give them? Sorry.
So the first piece of it is go with the beer kit and don't go with something crazy. Go with something simple. Go with like a
Mm,
blonde. Don't
hmm.
don't do what I did and try to go with a Vit beer because that was my first was a brewer's best Vit beer where you have to focus on this spice and this. No, go with
Mm,
the best recipe I can recommend is More Beer has a blonde recipe and
hmm.
it's Willamette at the beginning of the bowl. So you got your single hop and you're using USO5 or a variant of that if you're doing a
Hmm.
dry do that. Get your process down. Try it. Say, oh, this is good. Or if you don't have temperature control, but use Voss, something like that. And just give it a shot and see what you think. And then the other biggest piece of advice I can give is be receptive and willing to be receptive to whatever feedback that you get. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily going to be what you like, but it's going to be what you need to hear. And make sure you're absolutely receptive to that.
Hmm. No, that's some great advice right there for sure. Um, what do you think is the biggest mistakes new brewers make though?
Well, there's a lot to it, but it
Hmm.
all goes into the hobby as well because, there could be temperature control, it could be sanitation. Like when it comes to temperature control, I would expect a new brewer to have glycol or, I would
Oh
expect them to
yeah.
have a fermentation fridge or something like that. So, but I think a lot of it is going in expecting, oh, this is going to be the best thing ever. And, to be quite honest, it's not, but it's going to
Hmm.
be because you made it. But, it's you got to go into it, like I said, be receptive to the feedback, be
Hmm.
willing to learn,
Yeah.
So, but when you go into it, like I said, it's so much and it's a lot to absorb, but keep it simple and don't go in like I just spoke with a new home brewer a couple weeks ago and they wanted to make a very difficult recipe. And I said, no, keep it simple. That way, you can learn yourself some, you can,
Hmm.
get your process down. It's something you've never done before. You've got a sheet you're looking at for your times. No, keep it easy, make it easy to focus. So,
Right. I also think like don't beat yourself up either. I think that's another good one too, because even if it doesn't turn out the way you think it should have turned, or taste, I think I've seen that too, where like I tried to make this amber and it doesn't taste like this other amber that I've had before. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one, there's probably not even the same grain bill. That that's going to
yeah.
be totally different, right? So, like, don't beat yourself up on that for sure. So, for someone who wants to start uh yeast banking, like, where should they start? Should they just start from what they just brewed, or should they start?
Oh, well, so the first piece of it is I would recommend getting a stir plate. I know Denny would argue with me on that, but I'd argue right back and you would, to me, results are better, me more than anything I see on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So the results
Mm-hmm.
and what I get on my palate, that's what works better in my experience in my brewery. Now, other systems different, but no, get your stir plate. That's the first piece. But when you do your banking, just start from a liquid pouch. Get your process
Mm-hmm.
down. Just get a liquid pouch. Maybe get 1056 WLPO1, something like that. If you want to, say if you just got the stir plate and you've ever used that and you're trying to learn banking all at the same time, well, get maybe a dry pack of hops, something like that, and prop it up with
Mm-hmm.
2 liters, 1040. But a good exercise to use to get into that would be like get a 6 pack of Sierra Nevada or a 6 pack of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or 6 pack of the
Mm-hmm.
Bell's Two Hearted,
Right.
and learn how to propagate that up before you make that investment. Because I know a lot of guys say, I can pitch this one tube of yeast, in my case, 15 milliliters of yeast, and then 2 liters of wort, and it's great. I've never had that experience, not once. So that's why I don't do it. So that's what I'm saying. Get your process down with your yeast propagation
Mm-hmm.
first, and the best way to do that. And it's funny because when I buy Two Hearted, I always tell the wife, I'm not buying the beer. I'm buying the yeast and the beer's free. So,
That is perfect. Yeah, I like
yep.
that idea. Yeah, like I said, I really need to start. I need to start trying to do that stuff. I think it'd be so much fun, and of course, save money as well too. Then maybe I can
Mhm.
spend a little more better grains of a one as well. So, this leads me to the next question. What's one piece of conventional homebrewing wisdom that you think is just overrated?
There's so much out there. I guess one of the big things, at least when I first got into brewing, was glass
Hmm.
carboys. Don't use buckets, use
Oh.
glass carboys. And I've used different types of fermenters, and the only fermenter that I've had that I've noticed a difference in, and it's not has nothing to do with the material, the shape, the geometry, nothing. It's a pressure fermenter, and I can all but guarantee it's because I'm limiting the amount of oxygen that's coming into my
Mm.
brew during fermentation as well as kegging. And I can tell you for my hoppy brews that it's made a huge difference. But yeah, like I said, don't worry about what fermenter material you have. You don't need a stainless steel fermenter. A bucket works fine unless you brew something real hoppy. Then you have to worry about oxidation, the hops falling off, getting the cardboard flavor, maybe purple beer, something like that. But yeah, like I said, that's one of the biggest things. And the other thing is keep it simple.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Like, oh yeah, it kind of brings me to. Oh, I was talking to another Ryan, about like his grain bill was so complex that it's like 4 ounces of this, 2 ounces of this, 1 ounce of that. So he has like 13, 14 different, grains on there. And then I think he talked to some people in the homebrew club about that. And he was like going, why don't you take away some of those like minute and see if you can taste the difference?
Hmm.
And he took it away. He's like, yeah, I didn't really taste much of anything. I think it tastes exactly the same. Then I think he brought it in for us to try. Like he didn't tell us. He's like, I made the same beer but two different ways. You guys tell me if you guys taste the difference. Of course, everyone's trying to think, and I didn't taste no difference at all. So, and I feel like some of that smaller, minute stuff sometimes doesn't really impart anything unless it's like black malt or black prince. Like those, like you don't need much. That'll turn that sucker black as night for sure. Um, the one thing I don't care for Black Prince because I can actually taste the astringent in it. I don't care what it's in. I can taste it, and it just dries on my tongue instantly. It's such a weird phenomenon for me. But again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about judges. Like if I was a judge, right, and I had say like a dark stout or a black lager or something like that or black IPA, then someone put that Black Prince in there, like I would probably pick that up, knowing the fact that I don't like it. I may ding you for that, not consciously anyways, but because I'm not a fan of that. Um, let's see. I'm gonna kind of get to like a fun little section that it's called
Sure.
like it's called like rapid fire. So it's like either this or that for the most part. All right. So I think I already know the answer, but I put it in here anyways because I think it's fun. Stovetop or your all-in-one system?
All in one, big
Uh,
time.
here you go. Bottle or can?
Ooh, I only go with can because of keg. I bottled for 5, 6 years. I don't miss it.
There you go. I think I know the answer to this one, but I have it down anyways. Fresh yeast or banked yeast?
Banked yeast, but fresh if you
Ooh,
can get it because
there you
it's
go.
easier and it's less time consuming because
Uh,
my banked yeast I have up here, I'm having to plan 7 days ahead. With fresh yeast, you can go what 24, 48
go
hours and never raise a
right,
pitch. So
right. What is the most interesting yeast you've worked with so far?
Oh, there's a couple of them. I can tell you the, and I'm having a hard time saying this, but Lalaman Cold. So that they no longer make that strain, and that is
Hmm.
the most finicky strain that I've ever worked with. And we actually had a meeting with the Lalaman rep, and we talked about that strain. So with that one, the reason I like it is it's clean, but it's very finicky because
Hmm.
it doesn't matter what pitch rates you use, you're going to have about a 72-hour lag time. So the way to work around that, if you still have a dry
Hmm.
pack of Lalaman Cone, pitch a whole pack in. I know, the advice is don't do this with rice, but pitch a pack in a 2 liters, 1040, board on the stir plate, let it go, for 72, 4 days even, then cold crash it and it'll fire off like any other liquid strain. So,
Hmm.
but even Lalaman about that, I'm like, hey man, this is taking forever. And, so they sent me some packs and I will say that strain banks very well also.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's awesome. So the next one is going to be paint strainer bags or your all-in-one basket.
it depends on the uses. So, because there's certain
Yeah.
things you can't do with an all-in-one basket. So, if like I'm dry hopping in the keg, or I've got there's sous vide magnets holding up,
Mm.
hops and my fermenter. Of course, I'm going to use those paint strainer bags. But if I'm in my all-in unit, I would use my malt pipe any day over a brew bag because I've used one. It's just added
Mm.
an extra step. I didn't notice any bit of difference. So.
There you go. So hazy or clear beer.
That's one of those, all depends. If I'm drinking a lager, I want it sparkling clean. Same with the cream, I'll sparkling clean. If I'm drinking a
Mm.
juicy IPA, it can be either or. The haziness to me, would help increase the juice perception on that beer. And you see that your brain's instantly going to think not crisp. So,
Hmm.
like I said,
Hmm.
it all depends on the beer.
Oh, been the beer. Okay, that's a fair answer. Yeah, I like it. So if you could only do one of these, would it be cooking or brewing?
Brewing 100%.
There you go. Hey, perfect. Okay, what about brewing or playing drums?
Ooh, that's hard. That's hard to do because I mix both of them. So that's why I
Yeah.
brew so much because when we do our parades, or competitions, I'm bringing all
Oh
the beer with
yeah,
me. So
dude, that's awesome. Man, I need to come down and play some drums with you then.
that's right.
All right. So these are interesting questions as well too. So if one brewing trend you like to see go away, if you could.
Ooh, um, that's a good question because there's a ton of them. I can't think of any right off the top of my head because, like I said, there's a ton of them. I don't know. We might have to circle back to that one.
Okay. So the inverse of the question, is there one trend you would like to see come back?
So one trend that I would like to see come back is I don't know. I know this sounds weird, but I missed the strip the tooth enamel IPAs because that's how they
Okay.
were when I first started drinking. IPAs. It wasn't who could get the most flavor; it was who could strip the most enamel off your teeth.
Oh my, I don't think I had one of those unless it was like one of those like 120 IPAs or whatever.
Yeah.
Those I that was a rough. Yeah, I'm not a fan of West Coast IPAs. Like I like the way they smell. I just don't like the way they taste. Like I'm not a fan of the pine sol grapefruit stuff. Um, but I admire the process because
Mhm.
there is a lot of thought that goes behind it for sure, and I know the cost it has to be pretty expensive as well too because hops by themselves aren't cheap, right? So
Nope.
there's a lot of money that goes into it, especially if you mess up, right? Or if you go. I notice myself sometimes like I'll get a hop burn, right? So it does go away over time, but I mean I couldn't imagine like spending all that money on a few barrels to have the hot burn stay for like a couple weeks or a month even, then you can't sell it because nobody's going to drink it, right? So then you got to hurry up and make something else so you could sell to try to recuperate some money. Um, that's if you could only brew one style for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Well, I would go more with the type of salt lager, 100% lager.
Okay, I like that answer. Yeah, I don't think anybody said lager yet. I don't think. These questions I try to change all the time. I don't want people to be bored
No,
at the end of the end of the section, so I try to change it up a little bit. Okay, did you think of any trends you like to go away?
yes, 3470 being used for cold IPAs. There's better strains out there, and
Yeah.
it's just one of those strains. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. I've even
Mhm.
made a great New Zealand pills with the Belgian lager strain, the White Labs
Okay. Oh
WLP
wow.
815, which is a
Hmm.
seasonal strain. you can use better strains than 3470. I understand, why people use it because supposedly unlocking thiols, from Pilsner malt, the sulfur, all that. But there's there's so many better yeast strains for that.
Yeah, to do that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for playing along with that little rapid fire section. So we're kind of towards the end of the interview right here, so I just have like four more questions left. Um, it, if you could see any, if you know of anybody else that would like to be interviewed, you can go ahead and like just give them my information to kind of reach out to me. But if you know them by name, if you want to drop their names right now, that'd be great as well too. I mean, I can look them up as well.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I could definitely shoot your information over to the brew club though, and just say, hey
Okay.
guys, reach out to them, and we'll just see. So
Yep, for sure. No, I love it. Yep.
yeah.
Let's see. So you said you're going to enter one of your beers to Brewlosophy here shortly. Which beer was that?
So I'm not don't know if I'm going to enter it yet. So basically,
Okay.
how it works with the brew club, we all say, hey, whoever wants to send the beer basically throws their name into a pool, and
Oh,
then
gotcha.
there's a randomizer that selects whoever
Hmm.
from that pool. So I'm going to toss my
Gotcha.
name in the hat there. If I get picked, I'll send it in. If not, I won't. But it's going to be Tiny Bottom. Is that
Tiny.
it's
That's
basically
right.
just going to be a play on Tiny Bottom. But I
Hmm.
haven't picked a brew name for it or beer name for it
Hmm.
yet.
That's so. Is there any social media stuff or anywhere people can get hold of you that have any questions? If you don't, that's totally fine as well too. If you do, you can just send it to me and I can post it into the description of the of the all the stuff.
No, I mean, you can definitely reach out to me on Reddit through RT Strider One. That'd probably be the best bet there. So,
Okay. RT Strider one. Yep. Okay, cool.
yep.
Let's see. And okay, this is like the last question, I promise. Um, so what I've been doing at the end of every episode, when the episode goes live, I've been asking my guests if they would like to share a recipe with the audience. So what I have is I have like this Google Doc basically, and I have like each guest supply a recipe if they want to, and then that way somebody who wants to they can grab, Ryan's pale ale, whatever, and then try to mimic that as well. If you're willing to do so, that'd be awesome. If not, totally fine as well too.
Well, I've got a recipe. I'd love to share it. I've got some good reviews
Okay.
on it.
Okay.
But it comes with a really, really, really good story too.
Okay. Well, let's hear the story real quick.
Yeah, so this recipe it's called the Machinist Wheat. It's
Okay.
actually named after my stepson's job description. He's a machinist mate in the Navy, so he's currently deployed. So
All
I
right.
brewed this beer, using McGuire's proprietary house strain, and
Mm-hmm.
it's an American wheat with character. And I brewed it. I'm like, what in the world am I going to name this thing? Machinist Wheat, because it was his last day in town. This is about a
Mm,
year ago, and so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna name it Machinist Wheat. I named it after his job description there after his rate.
that is awesome. Heck yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
If you would,
yes,
you can just email that to me. That'd be perfect. And then I'll, like I said, when this episode goes live, I'll have it been linked in there or something like that. And, yeah, this has been a great time. I appreciate you coming on this evening and spending some time with me, chit chatting about your a little bit about your life story, your home brewing experience, and all that jazz.
absolutely. No, I appreciate you having me. I had a blast.
Yeah, no problem. So, Ryan, I hope you have a good evening and a happy brewing. I'll talk to you later.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Yep, see ya.